Before we get started here today, I need to mention something that I announced on Joe Rogan's show yesterday. I'll have more to say about the interview with Joe Rogan and the great conversation we had later on in the show. For now, I'll let you know that the first 15 minutes of my film, What is a Woman, are now available to watch for free and for non-members at whatisawoman.com. If you haven't seen the film yet, haven't yet been convinced that it's worth getting the membership for, head over to whatisawoman.com for an extended preview. And as I said, we'll talk more about the interview with Joe Rogan a little bit later on. Now, as voters head to the polls today, Democrats, those fierce defenders of the democratic process, have already sent the word out. Don't trust the results. At least don't trust them at first. To be more specific, the Democrat Party message about voting results is that you shouldn't trust them until they, the Democrats, start winning. ABC News makes the case in typical fashion, warning of a red mirage, not a red wave, but a red mirage. They say, as early election day results come in on Tuesday, it will likely appear that Republican candidates vying for any number of the federal or statewide races appear to be leading their Democratic opponents, even by large margins. Their leads will dwindle or crumble completely after perceived dumps of votes are recorded by state election officials who count mail-in and absentee ballots in the days or even weeks following Election Day. This phenomenon was popularized as the red mirage or the blue shift after the 2020 presidential election, when former President Donald Trump took a deceptive lead in several competitive states on Election Day due to delays in counting of Democrats' mail-in ballots, their preferred method of voting due to the COVID-19 pandemic, only to eventually dissipate when the entire reserve of votes was totaled. Now, that's what they say, but if COVID was allegedly to blame for the alleged red mirage, then why are they warning that it will happen again? I mean, the pandemic is over, remember? Joe Biden said so himself. ABC continues, this is likely to occur again on Tuesday, according to election experts, because of the same cocktail of factors that led to a red mirage in 2020. Democrats have continued to use mail-in voting more than their Republican counterparts, while some of the same decisive states will take a longer time to tally their mail-in, absentee, and provisional ballots due to state laws that prohibit their count until late stages in the electoral process. And it's likely to occur in some of the same states where the phenomenon presented itself last cycle, in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Battleground states that also happen to feature some of the most hotly contested races of the election season. So the real cocktail of factors is that these states choose to count their ballots this way, even though they don't have to. In fact, the article acknowledges that after the chaos of the 2020 election, there were bipartisan calls for states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin to change their laws to make it easier to count the ballots on Election Day. They chose not to make the change. So it doesn't have to be this way. It never was this way until just 2 years ago. But now that it is this way, Democrats say it must be this way and it should be this way. I mean, this is the leftist specialty, right? Radically changing something and then insisting that the thing now changed could never be anything other than what it is now, even though it was something else entirely 5 seconds ago. That was basically Karen Jean-Pierre's message yesterday from the White House. Here she is.
It took 2 weeks to call every state. In modern elections, more and more ballots are being cast in early voting and also by mail. And many states don't start counting those ballots until after the polls close on November 8th. So you heard the president say this the other night. He has been very clear on this as well. We may not know all the winners of elections for a few days. It takes time to count all legitimate ballots in a legal and orderly manner. That's how this is supposed to work. And it's important for us to all be patient while votes are being counted.
That's how this is supposed to work. There is, of course, it's supposed to take weeks, is what you just said. Now, there's, of course, no reason at all why it should take days, much less weeks, to count ballots. She says that these are modern elections. Well, in any other context, the mark of modernity is that things are done quicker and more efficiently. Why should it take longer to count ballots in 2022 than it took in, 1802? They say the reason is that so many people have voted early and by mail. Well, that explanation doesn't really make sense, because if you have the ballots early, shouldn't it be, if anything, easier to get them counted on Election Day? If it isn't, if early voting really makes it somehow impossible to declare a winner on the same day or even the same week, then that's all the more reason to abolish early voting. Putting aside active duty military, perhaps a few other isolated exceptions, the drawbacks of early voting and mass mail-in voting are substantially greater than the advantages, obviously. And that's a rather easy judgment call to make because there really aren't any advantages significant enough to be factored in or weighed. The current system, with mail-in voting and early voting, it affords people the opportunity to vote in their pajamas with as little effort as possible and without leaving their homes. Okay. That doesn't solve any problem or meet any pressing need. There's nothing wrong with requiring minimal effort from the electorate. In fact, it's a positive good to require minimal effort. And besides, even with same-day in-person voting, you can still vote in your pajamas. It's not like people care about dressing presentably in public these days anyway. So the advantage is that it makes even easier something which was already extremely easy, arguably too easy. Well, what are the drawbacks? Well, with early voting, for one thing, you're voting before the campaign is over. The candidates haven't finished making their cases. You may not know everything you need to know about them. What if a candidate, just to pull an example at random, say, has a stroke and becomes brain damaged after you've already voted for him? Now, in Fetterman's case, the brain damage happened before the primaries had even finished, but it still demonstrates the sorts of surprises and changes that can present themselves during a campaign. All the more reason to vote at the end of the campaign, not in the middle of it. I mean, there are a lot of people who, after that debate with Fetterman and Oz a couple of weeks ago, decided that they didn't want to vote for Fetterman anymore. Well, some of those people had already voted for him. For another thing, early voting does, in fact, provide more opportunities for cheating. Whatever you think about the prevalence of cheating, there is no debate that the longer you take to count the ballots, the more complicated and confusing it is, the more chances for funny business to occur. And that's obviously going to be the case. And finally, the current system, to use a phrase that we so often hear from Democrats these days, destabilizes our democracy. And there seems to be no disagreement on this point, right? The media, the White House, the Democrat Party, they all acknowledge that when states take days or weeks to announce a winner in highly contentious and pivotal races, it creates lots of public anxiety and concern about the integrity and reliability of the results. They openly admit this. They're predicting it. They tell us ahead of time that Pennsylvania will take forever to count its ballots because it chose not to fix its ballot counting system, and that this will create, from the perspective of a wide swath of the population, the appearance of impropriety. Well, here's the point. Even if you don't think that cheating is happening or that it will happen, even though it certainly does and will in every election, the fact that doing it this way causes many people to have less faith in the results, that's reason enough to not do it this way. The citizens need to trust the results. If they don't, the whole system breaks down. That is the house of cards that the entire system is based on, the trust of the electorate. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. Do the Democrats not see or not understand these immense drawbacks to mass early voting and mail-in voting? No, of course they see it, and they understand it. But to them, these are not drawbacks. They are the point. They are features, not bugs. We can only conclude that they want people to vote early and vote by mail because it means they're locking in their choice before the campaign is over, and because it gives the opportunity for, let's say, post-election adjustments, quote unquote, and because it destabilizes our democracy. The one thing they claim to fear the most is exactly what they, in fact, want and are attempting to engineer. Because the left seeks always to destabilize, destroy, demoralize. Preservation, even of democracy, is never their goal. And that's all the more reason why they need to pay the political price. They need to be thrown out of office. And we have to do it with the system that is currently in place, however horrifically flawed it may be. Take over the system and fix it. That has to be the goal. But it starts with your vote. So that'll do it for this portion of the show. I hope you get out and vote. But before you do, we'll get over to our member block of the program and hope to see you there. If not, talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.